A couple of things stand out for me when I look at this particular slide here, the statement about the journey that we're about to head up on: exploration and discovery. Going on that journey of agility, business agility, or trying to be agile with a capital A, it's fun. It's a journey, it's discovery. You're learning new things each and every day. Another thing that stands out in this nice little summary here is immersing ourselves. We need to be immersed in the activity, in the process of changing our organization. If we're not immersed, unfortunately, I have to say, you probably won't succeed. So we need to make sure we get immersed at all levels in the organization. And I hope that as I go through this presentation, I'll be able to share some principles and techniques where we can immerse our teams, our leadership, and our coaches that help us along the way. Now, I love telling stories. So I love putting things that will tell a story and help us along. And there's a common theme in these movies here. And I've tried to make it easy by picking movies from different age ranges. Right? So the modern ones like Pirates of the Caribbean, and taking us all the way back to the likes of Casablanca and Indiana Jones. Grew up watching Indiana Jones. But there's a common theme that runs throughout these movies. I would have asked you to raise your hand and answer, but I'll answer it for you. There is maps. There's something about a map. There's something fantastic about a map. And I love maps because they provide such rich context to what we're looking to do. For me, they show three key things that we're going to look at. They show us where we are now, our current position. They also provide us where we want to get to, our destination, and then they provide us with an opportunity to see interesting landmarks and other points of note along that journey, either along our path or to the left and to the right of our journey. Now, digital maps even take that a little bit further. With a pinch of your finger, you can either zoom in to see more detail or zoom out to get that helicopter view. So maps give us that fantastic ability. And in setting up the right Agile team, there's some things we need to consider as guiding points to setting that up. I can't go through everything. 30 minutes wouldn't do it justice, but I hope I can leave a couple of nuggets that will really set you up on the right way. We have a journey ahead, and it obviously starts with a question we need to ask ourselves. Do we need to actually go on this journey? Do we need business agility? Do we need to be agile? Or can we just plod along the way we're doing now? And the fact that everybody's doing it doesn't mean we have to do it, but we want to find out if it's needed by everybody. Secondly, north, south, east, and west. There's so many different methodologies, frameworks, scaling options that are available. We just want to make sure we have that right view of which direction do we need to go in, and what's the right option. Then there are a couple of other things we'll learn along the way, which will lead us to that point down there around forms and disciplines and practices that we need to evolve. I have some friends called Shu Hari, and I'll split them into two. So Shu and Hari, we'll learn about them and what those principles and guiding points are and how they can help us set our teams in the right way to deliver on agility in our business. Do we need to set up on the journey? The first decision in setting up an agile team is really about discovering if we need to be agile in the first place in our quest to business agility. Is this a journey we need to go on, or is it something we can remain where we are, as I said earlier, and press on maybe later on in our business journey? Do we start quick? Do we start big? Do we go small? There's certain things we need to look at. There's this wonderful balance scale, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, the tipping point, where we'll see whether we actually do need to go agile or not. And there are 2 points here that I want to note or call out. The first one is our burning platform. Do we have a burning platform within our organizations? And practically, what does this mean? Maybe we have a couple of unstable teams within our organization. People are leaving, people going in and out of the teams. The teams don't really deliver properly as expected. Maybe we have a huge amount of technical debt that we've built up over time. So we have a lot of workarounds we've put in place. We've never really gone to the root cause of the problems and fixed these solutions, but we've built so many workarounds that there's a large volume of technical debt that we need to clear. Potentially, attrition rate. We keep losing our best talent. We keep losing the people who actually can make the change in our organization. People come in for 3 months, 6 months, a year, and they're off somewhere else because they're not getting what they intend. They're not able to deliver what they want to be able to deliver, that value add. Probably unpredictable outcomes. We don't know when they'll finish the delivery. It's when the team finishes, we'll know they finished. So from a leadership perspective, you can't really plan much in terms of predictability. And the last one, which is one of I think one of the most worrying things in time, is our customers have no voice really. So either we're just chucking out features, releasing new software, releasing new functionality each and every day, but the customer doesn't really get to use it, doesn't really get to give us that feedback and say, could you tweak this a little bit? It would make it much, much easier to use. On the flip side, you might be in an organization where you have proactive leadership, culture of innovation and learning, motivated employees, predictability. And these are things that your organization might want to achieve. You might be fully in a proactive leadership space, in a burning platform, or a combination of both. But I strongly believe if you recognize or relate to any one of these points, you're at that point where you need to change. You need to do something a little bit different. You need to begin to evolve and get more, in the term, agile in the way you're working. Begin to invest in some business agility techniques and thought processes. An interesting statement here, just to set the tone right. Mark Anderson in 2011 said, software is eating the world. That was built on a little bit better in 2019 and said, services are eating software. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we're in a world that, a term I quite like, a VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, challenging, and ambiguous. We don't know what's happening in the business world. So we need to make sure we're in that position where we can turn left and right in our strategy, in our execution, and make sure our business survives in the long term. Last in this forming agile teams section of my presentation is around, we need to make sure in embarking on this journey, we have that why statement. We have that why that sets everything in context of what we want to do. I would encourage you to lean towards the intrinsic aspect of the why, where it's not motivated by obvious external rewards, but it's something that's enjoyable. It's something that's interesting. It's something that's desirous for our employees. So now we get to the crust of the issue here is north, south, east, and west. Which methodology, which framework do we choose? Now, this is a tricky question, right? Because there are countless methodologies, frameworks, schools of thought about practicing and how it looks like to practice and work towards agility. But then our trip to business agility needs a firmer anchor than just which left or right to go. We need something that really holds us and will help us accelerate towards that direction. To start off with, there's that starting off sequence or conundrum, the starting off conundrum. How do we start this off? I believe there are 3 things that we can do to help answer that question. Deliberate. Our decision to change and transform our organization is not like flipping a coin like my friend up there is doing, right? We need to make sure that we have that direction. We're deliberate in what we want to do. We have people who understand what that change is. We're not taking a chance on it. We need to baseline where we are currently. How do we know we've changed? How do we know we've improved our way of working? We baseline. We know where we are currently. And did I say baseline already? Because it's really important. Baseline, baseline, baseline. What's your starting point? What do you currently do? What are your current practices like? How long does it take you to move from concept to development and then to a product that's actually in service? How many bugs do you see in production? What's your current employee satisfaction scorecard saying? What percentage of your product is actually used in the market? Change is never easy, but baselining allows us to be able to see how that needle moves over time as we begin to embed some of these back to basic core principles and practices. The last one, personal favorite of mine, we've got to be predetermined. One of the worst things in life is to be deliberate and confident about something, but then really end up in the wrong place, right? It's like you're going on a trip with your parents or with your friends in the car, and all of you are so determined that you know where you're going to, and ask directions. No, we know where we're going to, and then you end up miles off course, right? You were all confident, you were all deliberate in what you wanted to do, but you weren't predetermined. You didn't open up your Google Maps and check what routes to check, or check with the traffic to see whether there's a blockage on the M4 on the motorway or something. You need to change your route. You need to be predetermined of what you want to what you want to. Make sure you engage with specialists, experts, subject matter people who've been there before, who understand the act of transformation, who understand what's needed to get business agility. And it's important to measure all these three things against that why statement that I said initially. Does it reflect back to that why statement? Now, that anchor. For me, this is the best anchor you can actually have. Right? There's an old church hymn, which I'm sure a couple of you will know. It talks about, will your anchor hold in the storms of life? Right? Will your anchor hold? What anchor do you set yourselves as a business? Right? I've mentioned anchor quite a few times, and I'm probably going to mention it a few more times when I get to the crust of Shuhari and understanding some of those core principles and ways to set up our teams. I have an unflappable principle when it comes to business agility. Whatever you're doing needs to align to these 12 principles and 4 guiding values. No matter whether it's Scrum, whether it's Kanban, less, XP, safe, you need to make sure you're aligning to these principles and to these guidelines, because it will make sure you set up in the right place. In sport, Formula One is one of my favorite, my loves, and I like relating things to real life. In Formula One, it's one of the best examples of this in practice. In business, countless organizations have excelled and developed way ahead of competition. Formula One, they really look at ensuring that they're satisfying they're delivering value frequently with the upgrades they make in the cars, from race 1 to race 2, race 3, all the way to race 21 we have coming up in Saudi Arabia, right? They break all the silos in their organization. You can't have a successful Formula One team if you've got silos. HR sits here, supply chain sits here, finance sits here. You've got to break those silos and be able to have a clear view, a slice through the organization that helps deliver this value earlier. Yeah. Build projects around motivated individuals. Everybody, I don't think there's one person who works in Formula One who doesn't love the sport. They love it, they enjoy it. We need to love and enjoy what we're doing in terms of our ways of working. You can continue and go through all these 12 principles, but effectively, you need to make sure whatever you're doing in terms of your agile transformation focuses on these anchors, right? And then you make sure that whatever practice you put in place puts individuals over individuals and interactions at the core of what you're doing. You're looking at satisfying the customer and collaborating with the customer as quickly and as often as possible. And that will set you in the right path to achieving that business agility you're looking for. Quickly on to my 2 friends, which I'll spend quite a significant amount of time on in Shuhari. It comes from a Japanese martial arts concept, and I'm sure a lot of you have watched one kung fu film or one form of kung fu, any film from Asia, Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee kind of movie. So you've seen these things, but there's that principle that applies there to describe the stages of moving from learning to mastery. The principles will help you when you are setting up your team, because initially your team joins and they need to learn the fundamentals and then move to a point where they've mastered it and effectively They become a high-performing team that's self-sustaining, and you can step back and begin to focus on other areas of the business. If you don't have that plan to move your teams from learning teams to teams that master their skill, master their art, you've not set yourself in the right path, in the right way to achieve business agility. So let's start looking at some of the concepts of SHU. It's the absolute beginning stage of everything. You follow the teachings of one master precisely. You concentrate on how to do the tasks as instructed by that master. So that master could be, you want to go Scrum. What are the principles and practices that you need to do in Scrum? Obviously, you do your daily stand-ups, you do your refinements, your reviews, your retrospectives, but how do you do them? There's a way you need to do them. You go by the book. In some instances, we've gone by going with the 3 questions you ask in the stand-up, and then with time, evolving that practice to have it more conversational, because the teams evolved with time. The point of SHU is about sound technical foundations. And this can be built most efficiently by following only a single route to the goal. So I've seen many organizations trying to dabble in multiple options of path to agility. I'll do a little bit of Scrum, do a little bit of Kanban, pick a little bit of XP. Let's see, okay, why don't we add a little bit of waterfall here and do a little bit of this here? And then they end up with what I like to call the Frankenstein of agility. At the end of the day, what happened to Frankenstein? Frankenstein's monster? He killed Frankenstein. We don't want our journey to agility to kill our business. So we need to make sure we're building it the right way, the fundamentals. There's no beating that fundamental stage, making sure you're getting grounded properly in one framework, one methodology, and then adding to that from other frameworks. So I encourage, if you don't remember anything I've said, please remember you need to have the SHU, right? The next one is developing on the how, which is branching out. You've got the foundation, you've got the skills. Now we can begin to learn from other best practices, right? Because you see the team are doing the right thing. You see the team begin to understand the principles and the theories behind the technique. So that takes us back to our Agile manifesto and our values. The team understand the principles, they demonstrate the principles, they understand the core value. So everything they do begins to reflect that core value, and they begin to branch out a little bit further. Learning from one master and integrating that into their practice, they've done that. So you can begin to move to that stage of how, where they branch out, the stage of spirituality or mentally, when it is necessary to have the high mind of inquiry and self-reflection. So you look back at yourself, okay, we're doing this really well. We've got this Scrum thing down. So I think we can begin to branch out and look at other things we can pull in and get better at the way we're working. Oh, now we've got Scrum, we've nailed it. Let's begin to scale out to the rest of the business. Let's scale it up, and maybe we go scale Agile and scale it up into the entire organization. And then my personal favorite is the re-stage, to break away, right? And this is where you begin to learn from your own experience. How did it work particularly in your environment? How did you apply it in your business to make it work? And you can begin to teach other people, other parts of your organization, internally and externally. And this is a stage where the student is no longer the student, but now becomes a pioneering practitioner. So your teams begin to influence other people, So start small, go big. Start small. That one team becomes such a master at their art, they begin to infect, like a virus. This will be a good virus. They begin to infect other parts of the business by teaching them these principles and these practices. Now, you've caught on to the gist by now. I like using pictures and analogies and stuff like that. We're going to meet our Kung Fu Panda friends, right? The coach, we're going to look at Shuhari from these 3 perspectives, or these 3 lenses: coach, leadership, and the team. From the coach, at the SHU stage, you need to make sure that your organization has a coach that enforces the basics of a framework. If you're at that SHU stage, you can't have a coach in your organization who's just going to let everything fly nilly-dilly, Oh, you don't have to do a stand-up. You can cancel it today if you're busy with too much work. Oh, you don't need to be doing refinement. We can just meet probably in one iteration, spend 2 days refining the entire backlog. You don't have to do it each and every. You need to make sure your organization at the beginning stage has that coach that enforces the fundamentals of whatever framework you've chosen. And I've been fortunate working in a couple of organizations where we've had such coaches at the beginning stage where they enforce the fundamentals. It's painful, it's not nice, but ultimately it helps us in the long run because then we can progress to the next stage. Also, the coach needs to be the teacher. And there's a mentality a teacher has. A teacher has patience. A teacher will repeat over and over and over until a student gets it. So probably you might be a coach and you might not like repeating. Probably means you might not be suited for an enterprise or a business that's at the infancy stage because you need to be repeating that. So you might need to focus your coaching ability or your outlook to a different setup. In the her stage, begin to impact the ideals of the manifesto. Encourage pause moments. I like this phrase of pause moments where the team break from tradition. So the teams have been practicing, but encourage them to pause. Let's take a step back. We've done this for a little bit. What do you guys think? How can we improve it? They take a pause, they recap, they adjust, and they run again. At that stage, effectively, it's the coach. Standing on the touchline, he's done the training during the week with the team. They're on the field of play. He stands back and watches them, allows them to play, passes a few advice in here and there, makes a few tactical changes, substitutions, etc. But then the team is moving along on its own. And at the restage, the coach needs to step aside and let the teams evolve, which is the hardest when you've been with them throughout the journey as a coach. But you need to step aside and you become the advisor. You come in occasionally, you speak. From a leadership perspective, I'll plod through this quite quickly. Leadership needs to be the promoter at the shoe stage and just trust the fundamentals of the framework. You've gone down that line, trust it. At the her stage, leadership needs to be the visionary. They need to start looking at taking that step back and also themselves living the Agile manifesto. And at the restage, they need to be the catalyst, creating the right environment, the right setup to allow the teams to evolve. This is where the teams begin to say, why are we've been doing this for so long, we want to change it. And management being the catalyst will allow them to change that. Leadership being the catalyst will say, you know what, I'm going to give you this budget to try that out and see if it works to accelerate your journey towards high performance. And the last, which is the where I like to focus a lot of my time, like Uzo said, in the trenches with the teams. The team needs to be a sponge at the shoe stage and just take everything in. The sponge, when you dump a sponge, if you can get a big enough sponge and you dump it into a bowl of water, it sucks up everything. It doesn't suck some of the water. If you've mixed it, it doesn't suck the water and maybe leave the coloring or something. It sucks everything. It takes all the knowledge in. It takes all the understanding. It takes all the practices. It takes everything. And there's no skipping this stage. At the her stage, the team needs to become a thinker. They need to begin to say, we've done this. We understand the principles. Wow. Those pause moments that I mentioned with the coach, encouraging them to have, the team themselves need to start having those pause moments and thinking about what they can do to improve. And at the restage, the team becomes the protege. They're now actively pursuance of self-discovery. A quick recap, whether we need to go on this journey, I think we've all been sold, we need to go on the journey. We need to be able to adjust, adapt, align, and conform, depending on where we sit in our business journey. And agility allows us to do that. There's that important thing of that concept of why in the middle here, which I've talked about. And it came more to life for me this week, over the weekend, when I was reading an article on the different generations that we have. My generation, you'll probably get my age when I mention, Generation X, we're resourceful, logical, we good thinkers and problem solvers. That's a characteristic of who we are. And this was an article I read from Dr. Alex Abramson. who's an expert in generational cohorts. And she said, that's Generation X, resourceful, logical, good problem solvers. Generation Y and Generation Z, where most of the people that make up our teams come from. Generation Y are confident and they're curious and they question authority. They need to understand why you want me to do this. And I'm sure you can relate when you're on a journey with one of these, they ask why, they always need to understand the why. So it's important, if you want to go on that journey towards agility, you have to have a why statement that can resonate with your Generation Y employees. Why versus why. A nice coincidence there, right? The Generation Z guys, they're also confident. And these are guys, depending, 1997, or some stats say 1993, some stats say from 2000 onwards. But these are the guys who are digital natives, as they call them, and they're ambitious. So your why statement would lock horns with their ambition, and they'll have that buy-in. So it correlates with having the teams buy into the idea of transforming, buy into the idea of changing. And by so doing, they begin to immerse themselves. And I mentioned that in the beginning, we need to immerse them. They will begin to immerse themselves properly if you can have them relate to that why statement. And the last one there goes back to my wonderful friend VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Well, we need to mind the gap that exists between our ability to act, respond, and change to our market. We want to try and get that gap as small as possible. When that gap is wide, then we know our transformation is not working properly, and we need to start trying to get that gap smaller and smaller, that if something happens in the market, we can quickly react and release a product or a service by closing the gap. So in terms of forming the team, there are a couple of things I want to call out. Make sure your teams have an identity. It's not just the name and a backlog or the purpose and responsibilities on the team, but they need to have an identity beyond that, right? What that team needs to have. And one of the things I've really loved that came out, and I used it a couple of times, and it came out from the Scaled Agile framework again, is the team formation toolkit. Taking the team through that team formation toolkit where they identify themselves. It starts with, why do we exist as a team? How do we succeed as a team? It was really fantastic and exciting. So get your team to have an identity. If your team doesn't have an identity currently, you probably need to do that immediately, because it helps. And you always do the plan, do, check, adjust process. You look back after a couple of iterations or increments or sprints, whichever language you use. You look back and see, do we still relate to that? Listening team. The team needs to listen. It's an odyssey journeying to agility. It's long. And we need to make sure they have autonomy. They're able to win the race, and they push the boundaries. Winning the race means you're not looking to go 50 meters if it's a 100-meter race. So your team should be set up such that they can go all the way and deliver everything and not half the way. The last few points I have listed there. There's no donut in your journey to agility. I mentioned shoe. Your coach, as a coach, you should be able to operate in shoe. As a leadership, shoe is important. But as a team, those principles I outlined at the shoe stage are really key to be able to create your complete circle. It may not be linear, your journey. It's not a line. You might, as you can see over there, my geometry is a bit off, but I can't mention the shape, but it's not linear. And then it's progressive. You start small and you go big. My last slide really is a question I leave with everybody, is once we get to where we intended to get to in our initial journey, is it a destination or is it stopover for us?